Alright, sounds brilliant. So what photos are you picking up?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage. Put your hands together, take them apart and put them together again with increasing enthusiasm for Mr. Richard Tyrone Jones!
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Richard Tyrone Jones and I'm ginger. Yay! I'm a poet. Yay! And I have chronic heart failure. I know, don't worry, I am of course joking, nothing to worry about. I'm not really ginger. No, my hair is only this colour because it's autumn. No, I'm not joking about being ginger, and neither am I joking about having heart failure, because, well, if I was joking about having heart failure, I'd be joking about having a condition which kills about 24,000 people per year in the UK. And that would be a bit sick. About as sick as I was when I was hospitalised with it in March 2010. So just to clarify, this is, for the next hour, the true story of me, my big heart, and how it tried to kill me. It'll be exciting, but not too exciting, because if my pulse goes over 250 beats per minute, then my implantable cardioverter defibrillator goes off. And if my implantable cardioverter defibrillator goes off, then we all get catapulted back in time. But first, I should probably explain who am I? Well, you know, probably it's better if I answer the question, who was I before I got heart failure? Well, I was a smart, healthy, everywhere cycling, hill walking, gym going, mostly non-alcoholic, and definitely non-smoking Cambridge graduate. Quite the man about town, I like to think. I'd fled my dreary West Midlands upbringing some years before to pursue the glittering career of a performance poet in London, traversing its historic green spaces in an effort to find inspiration, following in the footsteps of Betjeman, Keats and Plath. Okay, maybe not so much Plath, probably not the best poetic career role model that I could have thought of. But all of that was thrown into jeopardy when I contracted mystery heart failure, which left my saggy, baggy water bomb balloon organ pumping out just 10 to 15% of its capacity. I'm still talking about my heart here, by the way. That's when a healthy heart will normally pump out 50 to 60% of its capacity with each heartbeat. So how did this happen to me? I mean, I always thought that heart failure only affected genuinely old people, like 40 or 50-year-olds. And how did I manage to just not notice for quite some time that the most important organ in my body was rebelling against the second most important organ in my body was rebelling against me like a cardiac Libya. And did my doom have anything to do with the fact that, to mark my 30th birthday, I had actually held my own mock funeral, with me lying motionless in a coffin throughout, flanked on either side by women in black holding aloft fatherless ginger children, with hymns, tributes from friends, flowers, a reading of the will, and a surprisingly convincing vehicle. Well, it might have done. As you can probably tell from that, I did used to have quite a morbid sense of humour. Has coming any closer to death made me any more happy, more joyful for life? Or am I even more of a miserable git? Now I've actually got something to be miserable about. And what about the other 63,499 people per year who contract or die from heart failure in the UK? Well, to answer these questions, let's go back to what probably actually wasn't the beginning. Now, sometime before I actually began to feel ill, my louche, aristocratic GP, who used to like to listen to classical music during consultations, had diagnosed me with atrial fibrillation, a regularly irregular, essentially a bebop jazz kind of heartbeat. But he merely advised me to cut down on the caffeine and to take aspirin regularly, which I mostly did. Cheers, Doc. So when, towards the end of 2009, I began to feel apathy, lethargy, and not even wanting to go out drinking and womanizing very much, which is very much antithetical behaviour for a poet. I just put that down to my normal cyclical depression, which is very much thetical behaviour for a poet, and booked myself some cognitive behavioural therapy and a nice flight off to Rome in December to go and visit Keats's grave, cheer myself up. And then ploughed on with my normal punishing poetic schedule of getting up about 11, writing half a limerick, and then spending the rest of the day replenishing my bank of frankly unusable metaphors by watching 1980s science fiction Hollywood films. But further symptoms began to reveal themselves, not only fainting spells worthy of the heroine of an Edwardian novel, but also coruscating migraines, the like of which I thought I'd got rid of about 10 years previously at the end of university, when I'd had both all of my wisdom teeth and all academic ambition simultaneously removed. And so I, in fact, redoubled my efforts to keep fit, doing press-ups and sit-ups, and even joining a gym. I was dedicated, but like a cartoon Jamaican swimming up Egypt's longest river, I was in denial. Oh, come on, I almost died. I think I'm allowed 3 god-awful puns per show. The more exercise I did, the worse I felt, until one day a migraine, so huge that the Met Office could have named it, drove me home from the gym indefinitely. I came down with a horrible, perpetually mutating sore throat, come perpetual nose jacuzzi, come hacking cough through which I bravely, yet stupidly, and yet professionally, promoters, kept on gigging, despite soon being too unwell to even think about getting on a bike, and only being able to walk very slowly and breathlessly like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, with the occasional stabbing pain in my side like I had been zapped there by a proton accelerator. Well, the problem was that I thought the problem was just in my mind or in my lungs, because, well, those were where the symptoms were. I thought maybe I've got a little bit of a chest infection or a stitch. My GP made the mistake of sending me off for an MRI brain scan, which is a bit like being trapped in a drawer for 20 minutes and forced to listen to avant-garde Finnish techno. So actually not too dissimilar to my normal leisure pursuits. That one thankfully came back negative, so next it was time for a 24-hour electrocardiogram, which also goes by the far sexier name of halter strap. Next it was time for an echocardiogram, which is where they look inside your heart using a radar thingy, I think is the correct terminology for that. But I almost didn't make it to this echocardiogram because, well, I was up all night the night before. coughing my lungs up, and then stumbled, sleepless, in the morning to the emergency GP, who listened to my chest and prescribed antibiotics. I tweeted, "Hooray! I have a mere chest infection, and not the incipient heart failure that I was petrified I had. That will teach me." And later that day, the echocardiogram, and well, this was the first time that I'd ever looked inside my own body, turned out to be intimate, somehow religious, somewhat homoerotic, and definitely reminiscent of the 1986 Dennis Quaid film, Inner Space. Echo. Strong, black hands in thin, white gloves grease my chest and apply the probe. Like gazing down into a modernist cathedral. From the atrial vaults we see the flapping tapestries of the mitral valves like spastic butterflies, or the clapping of white Baptists who can't quite keep in time. We descend to the floor of this bloody transept, our view screen that of a bathysphere trip, 9 fathoms deep into your own corpus. Track left, enhance. I imagine Dante in a submarine, battling an exosuited henchman. The soundtrack. A wobble board, digitized, a clashing red blood cell tide. Was that a cross on the wall? An elder priest walks in, advises, "I'd take a look at that again. It's no cross, more like a puckered anus blowing us a kiss." A roadblock, a crater, a heart attack in training, a stroke gestating. In my mind's ear, I hear the guy whisper, "Lord Claude." It's a grainy picture, but it's black and white. I won't be going to that party tonight. I would like to point out that the echocardiographer didn't really whisper "blood clot." That would have been incredibly unprofessional. In fact, I should go so far as to point out that he was a highly respected member of the medical team, but then that's not surprising because after all he was an ultrasound guy. 2 god-awful puns! But I did next see a rather effete doctor who seemed to enjoy kind of comfortingly patting my leg just a bit too much. Well, perhaps he was just trying to distract my attention away from the fact that he was telling me that yes, I had this blood clot inside my heart which could break off and cause a stroke or a heart attack elsewhere in my bloodstream. I thought, this has got to be the worst health news that I will receive in a very long time. That will teach me! Because he then went on to describe how my heart had also become stretched, dilated by just 2 centimetres, but your heart is only supposed to be the size of a clenched fist. The fist at my centre had unclenched, and they had absolutely no idea what had caused any of this. You remember, I thought that I had just a bit of a chest infection. Well, it turned out that on top of all that, I had a chest infection as well. Which I was quite pleased about, because at least I'd been right about one thing. But after so much denial can only come admission. And so, into hospital. Very unwell. Coughing my lungs up with heart failure phlegm. Put on 4 different drugs. Put to bed. Docs in at all hours to suck up my blood. I was hooked up to drips and to blood pressure sleeves, a number of numbers slowly dropping on a screen with pulse monitors stuck to my self-harming chest. Still, I had a nice view in a room to myself. Now, given that a load of blood had just clotted inside my heart and given my already diagnosed atrial fibrillation, all the doctors that I spoke to seemed amazed that I hadn't already been put on the blood anticoagulant warfarin, which is also used as a rat poison, and I'm pretty sure I've got their first album. I was subjected to interminable identical interrogations, which I usually answered thus: no, I'm not really a bad alcoholic. In fact, I've always quite liked to think of myself as rather a good one. No, I don't really party that hard. I mean, I have tried a pinch of mephedrone, but only enough to annoy the Daily Mail. No, nobody in my family has died early of heart-related problems. We much prefer to go slowly mental instead. Italy in December, but Italy hardly counts as foreign anymore, does it? No, I've not been in close contact with any ruminant mammals recently. What are you trying to insinuate? But seriously, I was very curious to find out just what the trigger event had been that had sparked off my heart failure. Had I just been incredibly unlucky with a rogue virus spreading from my chest to my heart, or was there some deeper, darker, underlying cause? Well, either way, when you get heart failure, doctors will invariably stick you on beta blockers to hopefully slow your heart down and to stop it from damaging itself, and ACE inhibitors to shrink it and bring back some of its elasticity. But this pharmacopoeia worked too well, lowering my already low blood pressure still further, so that 5 days into my stay, a force 10 storm of coughing blew me off course into the intensive cardiac care unit. Well, I still had the presence of mind as I was carted off to issue a feeble royal wave. Well, this reassured my sister, who was down visiting from our ancestral seat of Dudley. But I didn't reassure myself at all. I began to realise that there was actually quite a large chance that I might actually die. I made my will. For real this time. Oh, so many fond hospital anecdotes to share with you. Yes, this next bit is a bit horrible, so if you do faint easily, probably best put your fingers in your ears. That evening the doctors decided it was essential that they insert a line directly through my neck, going into my heart, so that they could inject drugs straight in if necessary. And I was too fragile, though, to be given general anaesthetic during this procedure. They don't like to call them operations these days. And so I was given local anaesthetic and sedatives, but still had to keep my neck still and choke back my bubbly phlegm while I could feel them cutting into my neck and failing to get the line in the right direction for the first couple of attempts. Oh, and here's a tip for any of you guys in the audience. If you think that being so weak and bedbound that you have to pass your motions into what's essentially a papier-mâché bowler hat and then have your bottom wiped clean by a nurse, no matter how buxom she is, if you think that that is in any way an erotic experience, you are wrong. Especially when the nurse in question doesn't actually do that thorough a job of cleansing your anal cleft of the, by now, frankly orange, wet cement-like Aki Moo Moo. Told you there'd be some technical terminology. And here's another tip of saying to that nurse, as she attends to your posterior, oh, you know, some guys would probably get off on something like this. Not me, I can assure you. Is unlikely to assure her. Day after day of nausea, weakness and palpitations, gazing out over Hampstead Heath, wondering if I'd ever walk its springtime slopes again. I knew that I could leave at any time I wanted if I just ran out of there as fast as I could. I'd leave in a way that would mean I'd never have to have another blood test, see another doctor, do anything again. And that was tempting, because at least that way, if I was going to die, at least I'd feel the wind brushing on my face once more. A sample line from my diary at this time: you want Disneyland, you get Dignitas. Tired jokes. Physically, you don't fight illness. There's no bravery for the bedridden. It's not strength you need, it's patience. You just sit there, take your medicine, without energy even to fear, all leached out through toilets, through lungs, by sedation, wanting to, fearing to, straining to feel, but suffering, ironically, tear constipation. Well, then family and friends bring you more than mere gifts. They give heart when you've none left in reserve, by showing how, if you went, they'd be bereft. So I make us laugh at that tired joke, death, to pass on my love, hide my concern, but mostly because that's my behavioural script. The next day I found out that the hospital had those wheelchair toilets, commodes, so I could have sat down to go all along. A few tears escaped when I found that out. And it was only at this point, by the way, that the doctors put me back on the antibiotics, which they'd taken me off on entry to the hospital in case they interfered with the warfarin. Now, I noticed an almost instantaneous improvement as the one variety of phlegm, brown, left lung, consistency of Wrigley's chewing gum, lifted, leaving me with just the one variety of phlegm, white, both lungs. How to do justice to its frothy richness? Well, every time I brought some of it up, I was reminded, God, it's been ages since I had a McDonald's milkshake. And that was caused by the water that was not being properly pumped out of the blood in my heart, instead being forced through the capillaries into the lungs. So, it was now 1 week into my stay, and it was time for my angiogram, which is a delightful procedure where a lovely nurse called Angie comes in dressed as a chicken and sings you a song to keep your spirits up. No, it's not. It's a delightful procedure in which they inject into your groin an only slightly radioactive substance in order to find out whether you have the clogged up arteries of a 60-year-old alcoholic butcher. So for illustrative purposes here, we're using a 60-year-old alcoholic butcher. So, for this procedure, in walked a quite cute nurse who told me that, well, first we were going to have to get the top half of my thigh and half of my mons pubis completely cleared of hair. I thought, hello. But sadly, the only assistance she was able to give me in this matter was 2 cheap safety razors and a sachet of liquid soap. Nevertheless, I eventually managed this task myself, only flooding the ward by blocking up the shower with my shorn-off ginger pubes the once, until eventually, after I'd gone hungry all day, and the procedure had been delayed again and again, again and again and again, around tea time, they finally went in, through my wrist. Traditional hospital humour. And they also didn't do the biopsy that they'd promised, which would have been scraping a small sliver of meat from the inside of my heart in order to find out what that trigger event had been. So I'm afraid that means I can't tell you which is more perilous, going off to Rome, close contact with ruminant mammals, or snorting the now banned industrial plant food stimulant mephedrone. But what I can tell you is that thankfully my pipes were unclogged, so that meant that I had heart failure to deal with, yes, but not heart disease. Well, at that news, I could relax, managed to go to the toilet on my own for the first time in 2 days, and then slept deeply and well for the first time in 3 days. And then woke up in a small pond of my own blood. Not enough to drown a bag of kittens in, but enough to bathe a small chihuahua. On balance, it was a good thing that I'd happened to wake up when I did. The next day, one doctor told me that, in his professional opinion, this line in my neck, for it was that which had leaked, had been not only a complete waste of time and an MRSA risk, but that I'd also had a crust of dried blood around my neck for the last 3 days. I wish somebody had told me about that, because, well, I would have been picking bits off and eating it. I'm from the West Midlands, I love black pudding, mate. Lovely. So it's now 1 week into my stay, and I finally got my official diagnosis. Idiopathic dilated cardiomyopathy. In translation, big baggy and elastic heart muscles of an old man. And that meant that I won a visit from the heart failure nurse. Now, to the heart failure nurse, I quipped, well, heart failure nurse, with a title like that, you're probably never going to prove as popular a bedside visitor as the tooth fairy, say. Might need a bit of rebranding. To which she responded with, well, with a heart like that, you're now more at risk of developing cardiac rhythms not compatible with life. Might need an implantable cardioverter defibrillator. So I think she won that exchange. But that was the good news. The bad news was that she couldn't actually guarantee that all of these procedures that I was undergoing and all of these drugs I was on would bring about anything approaching a complete recovery. I found it a bit difficult to pay any attention to what she was saying after that. Blah, 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 possible heart transplant, blah, 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 blah. Well, despite all that bad news, I had been beginning to feel slightly better. And my reward for feeling slightly better was to be transferred to the mummy room at the Victoria and Albert Museum. Well, at least that's what the main cardiac care ward seemed like, so full it was of genuinely cadaverous old geezers. And while I was in there, they made a further tactical error, I believe, by sending in a rather incongruously attractive young Italian-American medical student to take my case history. What happened next? Well, the name of this next poem is Heartstopper. The ward's tourniquets sport smiling, cartoon Draculas. All night, old men's alarms have burst my dreams. Now, a med student, red-nailed, raven-haired, immaculate, asks so many questions, it's like she wants to date me. She reads my wrist with slow, sharp-clawed precision, then joins the rounds. If I were well, I'd love to get her skirt off. And at that thought, dark lightning strikes my chest. Sweat drenched, I claw for oxygen. Panic button. It's like my plug's been pulled. Breath fades so fast. I whimper, Mum, I love you. With my last. But the heart monitor nurse bursts in, rips back the curtain, shouts out, he's had a gap! The rest dash back, ask the student, can you get his shirt off? She panics, how? They just cut it, like on television. I'm failing, they're about to defibrillate me. Clear! But 2 docs have already stabbed in cannulas. Adrenaline stakes slow paths through my bloodstream. I'm alive, but empty. Trembling, vasovascular. Well, the good thing about that episode was that I got my own room again, just recovering, trembling like a hostage. The bad thing, though, for my own self-mythology anyway, was that they told me that apparently my heart hadn't officially stopped, just slowed down with an immense gap between beats. But either way, let me tell you that 4 seconds is a long time to wait for a heartbeat. Oh, the other good thing that came out of it, though, was that T-shirt that I was wearing was actually worn by a similarly morbid performance artist friend of mine called Charlotte Young, and for quite some months I've been wondering what would be the wittiest words to fill in the gaps on it with, but luckily my near-death experience solved that problem, and it now reads almost like a poem in itself. My heart almost died of dilated cardiomyopathy, and all I got was this lousy T-shirt cut up by the crash team. And who was that nurse who noticed my gap and saved my life? Well, it was actually the same nurse who'd previously been so poo at wiping poo. So I think I forgive her for that now. So let's face it, which is the more important life skill in the end? I'm sorry, folks, because this show has been kind of, mostly all about me so far. There were lots of other people on the cardiac care ward with even more interesting heart conditions than mine. Some of them even younger and more dashing, it has to be said. There was this one guy, 20-year-old, who, well, if I tell you that I gave him the affectionate nickname of Coke Man, we can probably guess what had caused his heart attack. Yeah, I've had a heart attack, bruv. Too much Charlie. I was laid in bed 3 days before I flipped. Went star crazy, bruv. Ripped out my drips, then bust out them doors like a one-man army. Why? 'Cause, bruv, I needed a cigarette. Nah, I collapsed straight back in intensive care. Oh, but when they done that echo thing, yeah, they found like I got this cardiac defect. Yeah, my arteries both go the wrong way round. No one's never noticed all through my life. Don't do no harm, but it's funny to think, nah, I'm leaving tomorrow. Can't get out. It's too much like prison here. Do you get me, bruv? But listen, when I'm back, do you need anything? I wonder if Coke Man ever suspected that his conversation would be noted down and turned into a Petrarchan sonnet. I was somewhat perturbed by Coke Man and put my mobile phone and my wallets in my pillowcase under my head as I slept. But the next day he left me his smoothie and a 24-hour telly card, which just goes to show you should never judge a drug dealer by their telephone manner. Next, I found myself the opposite of Coke Man, a really fit, health-conscious Mauritian guy in his late 30s who maintained, I feel fine, never felt better, but who was confined to bed with blood pressure over twice mine, 170 to my 70. They've been trying to get that down for 3 days. They keep asking me if I've been doing any drugs. I keep telling them, no, I've never done drugs. some of my mates. They need to get off their faces in the clubs before they've got the confidence to talk to the ladies. But not me. I've always had plenty of ladies interested in me. Only one lady came to visit him, though. Now, what he had was hypertension, high blood pressure. I was suffering from the opposite, hypotension. Well, the worst thing about hypertension is, as my fellow poet Tim Wells puts it, what's gonna kill you sounds like a 70s disco band. I had absolutely no idea that so many things could go wrong with the human heart. But I don't want you thinking that just because I'm only describing men, that heart problems are mainly a male preserve. That is a common misconception. No, heart and circulatory diseases will kill 1 in 3 men and 1 in 3 women. That's on a par with all of the cancers put together. Well, not that I'm trying to play a game of fatal disease top trump. But while we're talking demographics, what I was most concerned about was, well, to what extent was this dilated cardiomyopathy genetic, and had I passed it on to my offspring? Sorry, have I mentioned my offspring? No. Well, okay, there is a reason that they haven't featured heavily in the narrative so far. And that's because, you know, I've never met them. Not because I've been doinging baby mamas on the poetry circuit left, right and centre and then running off, but because before I knew about any of this heart failure problems, I was a sperm donor. And it turns out that Cambridge graduate semen is quite highly prized, even if it is ginger. To be honest, while I'm in a confessional mood, I should probably come clean and say that this is how ginger people breed. let's face it, no one's ever seen any of us mating successfully in the wild. But seriously, so yes, they're just my bio kiddies, I call them. All 12 of them. Seriously, there is a whole speculative, emotional kaleidoscope in my head about them, but as soon as I could stumble to a quiet spot on the ward, I phoned up the clinic and let them know what had happened, because I do have a big heart, literally and figuratively. And we agreed that it would probably be for the best if my kind donations stayed in the fridge, at least until we got the results of my genetic tests, which shall be revealed. But closer to home, I was going to have another procedure. This one was going to be a little bit more risky, with a 1 in 100 chance of death, but it was worth it, because the implanting of my implantable cardioverter defibrillator would correct both any too fast heartbeats, tachycardia, or too slow heartbeats, bradycardia, as well as rebooting my heart if it should actually ever stop. Well, this was stressful, but also quite exciting, because it meant that technically I was about to become a cyborg. Admittedly, not a good cyborg, crap cyborg, to be quite honest. Not so much the $6 million man as the 5,515 quid man. There we go. Sorry, the cyborg technology not working too well here tonight. But, yes, sorry, I should explain. That's 5,000 quid for the defibrillator, 500 quid for my braces, and 15 quid a month for my contact lenses. In theatre, I requested that they change the music that they had playing, reasoning, look, if there's any chance that I'm going to die on the operating table, I'm not going to die listening to Phil fucking college. But thankfully, the procedure itself was lovely, because this time the sedative worked so well that by the end I was quietly pleading for more, like a Dickensian whelp. And the doctor, Dr. Shu, he was incredibly good. I'd recommend him. He was his Chinese name, Shu. He wasn't like a disembodied Shu who walks in and does operations. I wasn't that out of it. He cut me open with all the skill of a veteran kebab shop owner, popping my new piece of kit inside of me like he was inserting a falafel into a pitta that you thought was never going to fit. And just to stitch me close, the ride of the Valkyrie swooped down onto the radio. Off my face on diazepam, that counted as a moment. 2 days later, I even felt well enough to be discharged. And stumbled out that afternoon into the spring sunshine to cab home and relax after 2.5 weeks in my own back garden with a lovely cup of decaf tea. And another 2 days later, I was back in hospital again. And this time, it was worse. Because this time, I was back in my hometown of Dudley. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Dudley, but if you have been, you won't be surprised to learn that the nurses there are not as attractive as the ones in London. Mainly because they all sound like this. Will you stop calling me Scraggle? In my experience. But I will be forever grateful for one of my symptoms that they alleviated while I was in there. For a relatively young and dashing heart failure patient from Dudley had phlegm that was thick, white and bubbly, till a diuretic prescription made his water retention gush out in a palpably good way. It lasted 4 minutes, filled 2 papier-mâché water bottles. The next day, I weighed 2 pounds lighter. It was the best piss of my life. So, I was finally free, but still frail, faint, frightened, and with so little improvement that even walking upstairs to take a shower left me gasping for breath for about 15 minutes. It looked as if I was going to have to remain on benefits indefinitely, get myself a mobility scooter, and, on the negative side, move back in with my parents in Dudley for the rest of my life, however long all that was going to be. I was adamant that this could not happen. So this is the poem that I wrote whilst desperately trying to hang on to my metropolitan address and lifestyle, whilst slowly coming to terms with the realisation that I was, to all intents and purposes, disabled, beating the bounds. This summer, my friends have been collecting the wristbands from festivals. I've been doing the same, but with the name tags from hospitals. They say the first step is the hardest. That's not true, because it's almost as if I'm still normal for the first few. But my first rest must come after 40 paces. Then at 20, 10, 5, I'm the frog in Xenos' second paradox. Will he ever reach his pond, or just gaze down at wasted legs which, this time last month, were still thick as a toad's? If the vessels in my defective bloodstream were stretched, they would reach the length of whole borders, jump hill, vale and watercourse. Once did. I used to roam as far afield as Luton, Leeds, Milton Keynes for a school's gig. Now, eastward, I can inch to the chip shop, but they get cold before they get home. Westbound, Archway is my border, but I now must bus back because every return journey has become an uphill struggle. Like me, my 88-year-old granddad takes warfarin, 3 milligrams to my 6, diuretics, 20 milligrams to my 80. I've borrowed his stick, and I'm also on NACE inhibitors, beta blockers, cocodamol to firm up my squits, and diazepam to stop me from waking in the night, choking on my own throat, spasming on misfiring neurons, which maybe once were hopes. I stagger my trips based on benches and low walls. On rainy days, I stay in to save crushing whole families of snails, leaning against lampposts to let pushchairs push past. Heavily breathing, I'll soon get a reputation as the local creepy man. My heart strains to escape or catch up like a trapped pigeon, a crap clock. Its device would resurrect me faster than Christ, but rather than install a new lease of life, I feel I'm in my 30-day reprieve. I'm an invalidated warranty. They say home is where the heart is, but home is only where the heart will let you roam, and my security barriers are the tidal currents of water retention, stinging me in the kidneys if I stumble into them, keeping me in dock, my internal tasers. I used to walk as far as I wished. No, I don't even wish to walk. I fear the day will come when I'll stop running, even in my dreams. So that was a bit of a low point. It looked as if I was going to have to say goodbye to all the physical activities I'd once enjoyed. Walking holidays, foreign travel, even sex. I mean, yeah, it still just about worked, but well, I was hardly the man about town anymore, was I? I mean, the quest for love, which had once overshadowed every other aspect of, the search for sex, which had once overshadowed every other aspect of my life, now seemed of merely historical significance. So much so that I even wrote a poem called All Your Ex-Girlfriends as Soviet Statue Park, which is in the book of the show. And yet, despite all this, I still managed to keep it together. Mentally, I mean. Which was funny because previously, when faced with relationship breakup or job loss, I had gone completely to pieces. Or maybe it was because this was something physical that I had to face up to. Maybe it was because I realised the truth in what all the self-help books I'd started reading said, which is that you can't always take responsibility for your physical situation, but you can always take responsibility for your personal response to it. Or maybe it was just because now I had the ultimate excuse for any of my personal failings whatsoever. I've not got a job. Well, I've got heart failure. Or a girlfriend. Well, I've got heart failure. I don't even have a theme for my first solo show. Well, I've got heart failure. Wait a second. And yet, positive mental attitude can't take away breathlessness, pain, and limited mobility. Especially when, in June 2010, I found myself back in hospital for the 5th time that year, with my heart capacity apparently down to just 7%. Things weren't looking good. Except then, doctors dashed 2 new ingredients into my drugs casserole. Eplerenone, which lessens blood volume sufficiently that the heart pumps less blood, but it pumps it more efficiently, and digoxin, perhaps better known as the foxglove-derived poison digitalis, which augments hemodynamics by increasing calcium ion reuptake in the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Now, I haven't got any idea how the hell it works either, and I didn't want to give myself any false hope here. It did. As soon as the end of the week, I had to admit that, yes, now, I didn't have to stop and gasp against a lamppost every 5, 10, 20, 40 paces. I was getting better. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that I felt like one of the old people in the film Cocoon 1985. So, I was improving. But never mind me. What about my bio-kiddies? That's what you're all thinking. Well, it's time for the results of my genetic tests. But first, here comes the science bit. Now, there are over 80 identified different genes which code for 80 different facets of dilated cardiomyopathy. Now, some of them will affect people in their 50s and mean that they have to take some tablets and take it easy, but the dreaded, deadly lamin AC gene can cause sudden cardiac death in the young. Well, my test for that one came back as, remember, this is important because these kids are the future of the ginger race here. Came back negative. So they won't have that one. Phew. As for the other 79 odd genes, well, like most cardiomyopathy sufferers, I'm not waiting for the results of my genetic tests. I'm waiting for the genetic tests themselves to become cheap enough and comprehensive enough that the NHS will actually fork out for them. Well, but then all of these new cutting-edge technologies, genetic testing, stem cell research, new bionic hearts, all of that takes time, money and patience. I'd argue that it takes a well-funded, well-integrated, non-privatised NHS. But what do I know? I'm just a patient. And more importantly, in the meantime, should I be allowed to have children myself? Well, you know, I say myself, you know, with a woman. Preferably one I've met this time. Well, what about people who carry around genes for cancer, blindness, deafness, male pattern baldness, cleft palate, not being able to roll your R's properly? Where do you begin? Where do you stop? There's 23,000 protein coding genes that must be copied to make up each human being. That's enough to make sure that there's going to be transcription errors in some of them. That's why there's so many terms for so many conditions that we might be carrying around inside ourselves even now, unbeknownst to us. Terms and conditions, if you like, written into the small print of our DNA in this unsigned contract we call life. That's why this next poem is called, and oh, by the way, it's a rip-off, it's a tribute to Tom Lehrer. It's called Terms and Conditions. 'Cause there's cancer and porphyria and hypercalciuria, adrenal hyperplasia, dystrophia myotonica, and hypochondroplasia, 5-Leiden thrombophilia, and hyperoxaluria, methemoglobinemia. Classic galactosemia and sickle cell anemia, ataxia hemophilia and beta thalassemia, propionic acidemia, hyperphenylalanemia, and otospondylomega epiphyseal dysplasia. There's cerebral autosomal dominant arteriopathy with subcortical infarcts and leukoencephalopathy, acrocephaly, obesity, compression neuropathy, and dilated, hypertrophic, and arrhythmogenic right ventricular cardiomyopathy. Chondrodystrophy, diglycerate dehydrogenase deficiency, and non-classic type D myelinogenic leukodystrophy, hypoxanthine guanine phosphoribosyl transferase deficiency, adrenoleukodystrophy, and just muscular dystrophy. And Bourneville-Facomatosis, perioral lentigenesis, Tay-Sachs disease, and also type 1 neurofibromatosis, craniofacial dysostosis, Duchenne's cystic fibrosis, dermatosparaxis, and mucopolysaccharidosis. We didn't start the fire. We didn't start the fire. No, we didn't light it, but we're trying to fight it. There's cretinism, dwarfism, and hyperandrogenism, pantothenate kinase-associated neurodegeneration, colour blindness, idiopathic pulmonary hypertension, and fragile X and triple X and XXXXX syndromes. And those are just the ones that have had write-ups in the Lancet. So if you're expecting perfect kids, I don't fancy your chances. Map, 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 oi! So what is the moral of this story? Because there's got to be a moral to every one-man show, hasn't there? Although the moral to this story is quite simple. Don't get heart failure! It's horrible! Seriously, if any of you present any of the symptoms that I've just described and ignored, chest pains, migraines, frothy phlegm, exercise intolerance, get yourself down to the doctor and don't stop pestering your GP until they've given you an ECG, an electrocardiogram. Don't let them fob you off with a BCG or an EGG. just an egg. Because absolutely every one of us hides within themselves their own personalised horrible health fate, and we have to face up to it because it doesn't just affect us, it affects family, friends, everybody around us. I was lucky, for someone who's been so unlucky. Who here gets annoyed when you get stuck behind an old couple in a supermarket aisle or an alleyway and you can't get past them? Or, I was overjoyed when that happened because, hooray, I'm faster than an old person once more! In October 2010, my next echocardiogram revealed that my heart capacity had crept back up to 25%. That meant that I could tackle a 1 in 4 gradient. My heart had shrunk by 1 centimetre. The clot had completely gone. I even managed to walk home after the echo over Hampstead Heath. 6 months after wondering if I was ever going to be able to do that again. I even came up with the idea for my last poem. And, well, has it affected me long term? You bet. I still have to take about 9 different tablets every day, 10 if I get lucky. I'll never be able to bungee jump, scuba dive, or drive a monster truck legally. I still, more importantly, have days when I feel absolutely exhausted, just like an old man again. But have I been left more grateful, more hopeful for life? Yeah, I certainly have. Especially for those bad days, because they show me in stark relief just how much I've improved. So, would I go so far as to say that having had heart failure has somehow, for me, been a positive thing? Well, I wouldn't recommend it. But yes, I would. Because, well, now every tenor seems to me as if it's worth $1 million, and every song's a symphony, except for Robbie Williams. Now, every time I'm tired, I think, at least, thank God I'm breathing. And even if I lose my breath, at least my heart's still beating. And thank goodness I can walk, although I can't walk very fast, because now every step's a giant leap, because it's not my last. Or some folks said, oh, you've been so brave, but The reason I've not cried is that, well, now my life has meaning because I almost died. Yes, now even the centre of Luton seems a quaint, historic town. All my clothes are Louis Vuitton because they're not medical gowns. Now every open mic's a gig, and every gig is Wembley, and every meal's a gourmet one. Now my strawberry tart's less trembly. See, I thought that I would be in pain for the rest of a shortened life, but now my health has been regained. Every girl's a potential wife. I've re-tarmacked my libido's parking space. Yes, I've got back my sex drive. 3 god-awful bugs in the show, yes! But it's sacred now to feel profane because I almost died. Yes, now every price tag's Asda price. Every slum's a mansion. Every poem I write's a masterpiece, despite its crap scansion. Every B&B's the Marriott's. Each not to be's a B. Every poet I meet's a laureate. And every man is me. Every splinter is a relic. Every measure is a bottle. Every poem is an epic. Each novella is a novel. Well, if life's a search for meaning, I think mine might have arrived, because now my life has a narrative arc, because I almost died. Now each example is a paragon, each mini-milk's a feast. Every stroll's the London Marathon. Now the acute abdominal pain has ceased. There's a meal in every morsel, in each crisp a whole potato. I feel practically immortal due to my implantable cardioverter defibrillator. Sure, some days I feel like an old man, but I'm still too young to die. I've been through the slough of despond and come out the other side. When things got tough, I'd once feel low and hold thoughts of suicide. But now I never shall. I know, because I almost died. Now every pasty is a ginsters! Every heckler's a mere wag. Every frog's a princess. Every car's a jag. Now every dwarf's a BFG. Each burglar's a lovable rogue. Each summer loves Eurydice. Each tramp's, hey, you that bloke out the Pogues? Every mountain is a molehill. Every puddle is a lock. Every sunset makes my soul thrill. Every ham slice is a chop. Now CSI seems like The Wire. Each B-movie, Citizen Kane. Each damp squib's a roaring fire. Every mullet is a mane. And even if I lose my breath, each gasp's a laugh in the face of death. I'm crap at chess, but death's in check because I'm still alive. Yes, if words were bullets, I'd be a Gatling gun. If hopes were bees, I'd keep a hive. But for now, it's probably best I stop prattling on about how I almost died, because a lot of people who've been in my situation have.